30 more seconds. Great. Well, appreciate everybody taking the time to join us today. We're excited to present our webinar, Simplified Professional Licensing for Architecture, Engineering, and Construction Firms. So many firms across the United States share a fundamental challenge, meeting all of the regulatory requirements they face. Maybe your firm is struggling to maintain and renew licenses, manage qualifying engineers, or hire and operate in other states. Perhaps you feel like you're constantly reacting instead of leading your firm through these events. That pressure only intensifies when new business opportunities arise, since firms need to be in good standing to bid on new jobs. You are not alone, and we're here to share our expertise in maintaining multi state compliance. Before we begin, two quick housekeeping items. Because we have a large number of attendees today, the audience will be muted. The presentation is also eligible for continuing education credit through Earmark. I'll explain how to claim your CE credit at the end of the session. My name is Kevin Miner, and I am an account executive here at Harbor Compliance. My expertise spans across corporate and AEC industry specific licensing. On your screen, you'll see my contact information, and I encourage you to take this information down. And if you think of a question after the call, whether that's today, tomorrow, or in a few months, please email me and I will work to get you a response. I will also show this slide at the end of the webinar. Moving on to slide 3, a little bit about Harbor Compliance. We're experts in architecture, engineering, and contractor licensing. Since 2012, we've helped more than 40,000 clients navigate regulatory requirements. Within the AEC industry specifically, we've helped over 8,700 firms apply for, secure, and maintain licensing, entity registration, and tax compliance. We have a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and dive in. Today, we'll talk about the benefits of compliance and how it supports your firm's strategy, what to expect when licensing an AEC firm, key issues that arise when expanding into new jurisdictions, a comprehensive management solution that helps firms comply with regulations and mitigate risk, and how a proactive approach positions firms to compete more effectively. We all know that licensing is required by the law. That is obvious. But have you considered the ways in which a well run licensing and business compliance function can be an asset to your firm? Being able to secure new licenses quickly enables you to capture growth opportunities in other jurisdictions or disciplines. It ensures the firm can pursue new business, meet their timelines, and gain an edge over competitors that haven't been as proactive. A comprehensive compliance program provides confidence and peace of mind that your organization is fully compliant. Maintaining your licenses without any lapses or gaps reduces legal, financial, and operational risk, safeguards your firm's reputation as well. And staying in good standing upholds professional standards of architect, engineers, and contractors. It also gives visibility and clarity into the status for each registration and license for your organization. It saves your business time and money by enabling efficient operations and communication, and it ensures continuity through business changes and staff turnover. A proactive approach means firms can take advantage of these benefits. We'll talk today about how to create a program that enables you to achieve them. These are four licensing challenges AEC firms face, which we'll cover in depth in the coming slides. Beginning with navigating the complex licensing requirements to secure professional licenses for both the individual, professional, and the firm. We'll discuss the importance of managing license qualifiers, otherwise known as qualifying engineers or responsible parties, and their continuing education requirements. Then we'll discuss how licensing becomes more complex as you expand into more states. There are considerations around the business entity's name, structure, and ownership, which are closely intertwined with licensing requirements, particularly the qualifying engineer in the new state. We'll discuss the requirements for licensing renewals, including the need to maintain good standing and how to stay abreast of regulatory changes. This is a high-level view of the first challenge we'll cover, which is managing the process of applying for professional licensure for the first time in a new industry. There are, in fact, over 800 state and local licensing requirements across the United States. Firms need a system to research and fully understand the varying requirements for each license type in each state and local jurisdiction. Each may have business and licensing regulations with certain prerequisites involving firm licenses, individual qualifier licenses, and entity registration. It's important to understand the order in which license applications and supporting documents must be submitted. This is the perfect time to mention our brand new Compliance Navigator AI research tool, which you'll get a chance to test out today. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but it completely reinvents the old school process of manual state by state regulatory research. More on that later. Once you've determined what specific requirements apply to your business, you've got to gather all the information and documentation used in completing the application filing. That includes keeping up with continuing education, surety bonds, and insurance requirements, as well as financial statements. As you can see to the right, the list of potential requirements is long and varied. Licensing authorities commonly require proof of Secretary of State and even Department of Revenue good standing during the initial and renewal application process. Many licensing jurisdictions stipulate that the business maintains internal records and follows certain governance or ownership requirements. These may or may not be reported on a license application, but most licensing agencies have the authority to enforce and penalize governance violations. Firms need to fully understand the order of entity structure, naming, and ownership requirements before attempting to register or pursue licensure. Why? Because the order of operations between state agencies varies. In some states, like New York, an engineering firm actually has to begin the process of licensure with the state education department before it registers with the entity with the Secretary of State or Department of State. But in others, like South Carolina, the entity registration happens before the firm applies for its license. And in most states, at least one individual, known as the qualifier, must first have their individual professional license. Which brings us to our first challenge, managing qualifiers. As you probably know, a qualifier is the licensed individual designated on your firm's license as being responsible for the firm's work in that state. In most states, at least one individual, known as the qualifier or responsible party, must first have their individual professional license before the firm can apply for their COA. Without a license qualifier in most states, the firm's license application will be denied and they will not be eligible to do business within that state. Managing qualifiers is critical for businesses as the licensure of these individuals directly impacts the overall standing of the firm. For that reason, you might come across a synonymous term, the responsible party. Professional engineers and architects are the foundation of certificates of authorization. It is vital to maintain them and track their CEUs in order to protect your firm's stability, reputation, and right to practice. 13 states have determined that an engineer is in responsible charge must be a full-time employee of the firm, defined as 60% of working hours in Virginia, 30 hours per week in Ohio, in Tennessee, and a majority of working hours in North Carolina, Oklahoma, and Wisconsin. Indicative of their importance is this quote from the state of Illinois that, quote, the design firm will be inoperable for all professions if the license of even one managing agent becomes inactive or not renewed. Since nearly every licensing board asks about legal and pecuniary action occurring in other states, the damage can spread across all your business and range from financial to reputational and everything in between. So, let's discuss best practices for managing qualifiers, as the licensure of these individuals directly impacts the overall standing of the firm. In most states, without a license qualifier, the firm's initial license application will be denied. Also, any changes in the qualifier's information or a change in qualifier altogether must be reported within a very short period of time, typically within 30 days, sometimes within as few as 10. Now, we know that changes in qualifiers can happen for innocuous reasons, such as an individual moving home addresses. They can also happen for more significant reasons, such as an individual departing the firm through retirement, resignation, or winning the lottery. Whether these changes are sudden or expected, firm management needs to be ready to update state licensing boards. If an existing qualifier leaves and no one holds the proper state license, someone is going to have to sit for the exam. And I can think of at least one recent client situation where the new qualifier had to actually fly to the state in question to take the exam in person in order to be licensed in time. And if the firm does not report this change, states can and do assess severe penalties for operating without a designated qualifier, up to the denial of the firm's right to practice. This is why managing qualifiers is mission critical for every firm. Here's what you can do to meet this challenge proactively. One, knowing which qualifiers will be designated for each business entity and in each state. Many states issue licenses to specific areas of specialty, such as structural versus mechanical for engineers, residential versus commercial for contractors, and firms that practice in multiple areas across states need to know the licenses for each. When attempting to register in a new state, this means any qualifiers generally must be licensed in advance. Firms must be proactive. No one wants to miss a key opportunity because a qualifier was not licensed in time. Next, ask your team, do you know who your firms or your clients' qualifiers are currently? Which states and entities are they acting in that capacity? If that person leaves the firm tomorrow, who could fill the role within just a few weeks or even a few days? Answering those questions will identify any gaps you need to address. Lapsed licenses may incur penalties to reinstate, but it's better to tackle these types of issues head on. Once your licenses are in order, work to identify individuals who could step in as a replacement qualifier. Firms should work towards having a contingency plan, especially in key jurisdictions. And you must consider the state processing time. You will recall that licensure involves multiple agencies. Many licensing boards have only a handful of staff or meet on irregular bases, such as monthly. Expediting an application simply may not be possible regardless of who handles their submission. The state of New York, for example, can take upwards of 4 months to approve the formation of a design professional corporation, and that is assuming that everything was submitted in exact accordance with the state's rigorous standards. As a result, management must take a significantly long term view with respect to licensing. Compliance becomes integral to the firm's ability to pursue out of state opportunities as well as to maintain the right to practice on an ongoing basis. It is simply not possible to react and attempt to pursue licensure in response to an opportunity. Most times, that opportunity is already passed. Finally, Finally, much like managing firm licenses, firms need to invest in a way to manage qualifiers and track their continuing education certification. An ideal solution includes a software to track qualifier information across states, giving management immediate visibility into who is licensed where, and producing an actionable list of tasks whenever a departure occurs or is imminent. Another challenge is when firms want to expand into other states and are required to register to do business in each state via foreign qualification. Today, many businesses are seeing the need to foreign qualify in one or more states. A highly relevant example that became more prevalent during the pandemic is needing to foreign qualify due to remote work arrangement where an existing employee is now working from home outside the company's domicile or physical address. There are plenty of other reasons why a business would need to expand, whether it's planning to submit proposals, opening a branch office, or simply having regular commercial activity or a physical presence of some kind. If you do not want to, if you do want to look up a specific transaction in any state, I encourage you to use the link on your screen to check out our foreign qualification ultimate guide. To foreign qualify in a new state, the business is faced with the prospect of ensuring its name is available for use, identifying a reliable registered agent in that state, and filing the appropriate forms with all the appropriate state agencies, including but not limited to the Secretary of State, Department of Revenue, and licensing boards, all before beginning to transact business. So now we are going to um, do a poll question. I will launch it here. So, expanding registrations. Does your firm need or plan to register in additional states within the next 6 months? Oh, looks like everybody answered. 67% say yes. So, pretty high number there. 31% or so do not need to expand. Great. Thank you, everybody, for responding to the poll. Now we will move forward to the next slide. There are variations to each state's requirements to register for foreign qualification, so it's important to research each state's requirements and understand the process and the order of operations between state agencies when registering the business in another state. Overall, most states require the qualifier to have their individual license first and proof that the firm is in good standing in its current domicile. It must identify a reliable registered agent in that state and file the appropriate forms, all before beginning to transact business. To submit the Certificate of Authority application, proof of good standing by the firm in their current domestic state is often required, and the COA approval is usually required for the licensing application to be reviewed and approved. Preparing the licensing application involves confirming availability and clearance of the legal name. For example, for ABC Engineering, it may require a letter from the licensing board showing that the word engineering can be used in the name. There are multiple agencies involved in the foreign qualification application and licensing processes. Typically, the licensing agency, such as the Board of Engineering or Architecture, will provide more specific information for firms than the Secretary of State will, especially regarding ownership structure and naming requirements. Multiple calls to each agency to verify information may be required, and this can create some logistical difficulty between identifying the need to register and the time it takes the state to approve the application. If you're not careful, there can be penalties for late registration, as well as potential delays in starting business transactions in the new state. You can see why dedicated research and preparation are needed before entering any state. Failure to do so will result in rejected licenses and business entity registrations, costly amendment fees, and delays in the ability to start work in a state. Now imagine going through this process in several states, and you can see how intricate multi-state registration can be. Businesses should examine their current and planned activities out of state and assess whether foreign qualification and additional registrations apply, and if so, work to secure them. So let's dive into the business naming and structure in more detail. When registering for foreign qualification, and the business must ensure its name is available for use or at least a variation of it. You're probably familiar with certain professional entity types, which allow a given company to practice in a regulated profession. Examples include a professional corporation, professional association, PLLC, uh, otherwise known as professional limited liability companies. Professional entities are registered and named at the state level, and the requirements also differ from state to state. Take, for example, a South Carolina engineering firm. In South Carolina, there's no professional limited liability company entity type. Thus, the engineering firm is organized as a traditional LLC. However, if that firm wishes to operate and obtain licensure in North Carolina, a traditional LLC won't be approved by the Secretary of State or the licensing board, because in North Carolina, they require that professional limited liability company, or the abbreviation PLLC, must be included in the name. This leaves the firm with two entities across two states to maintain under two different entity names as well. In addition, many states have distinct naming requirements for AE firms. In most states, only companies that are authorized to practice architecture or engineering are able to use those and related terms in their legal names. For firms formed in states that don't require one of those words, they can expect to need an assumed name in that new foreign state that includes that term in order to comply. And the forced assumed name must be used in state on everything from tax accounts, firm licenses, and even contracts and invoices. For example, in Idaho and Alabama, the firm must have an engineer on staff and in good standing before they can use the word engineer in their name. And in a different twist on this requirement, we had a client that wasn't an engineering firm but wanted to use engineering and their name in their name, and it was denied. Another naming challenge for the business may come into play during a rebranding initiative as well. The same process of checking availability applies before the new name can be recorded and used. And if the business registers in multiple states, this becomes a state by state exercise. And here's a flow chart. Then there are ownership requirements. States want the principals of AEC firms operating in their states to be licensed, hence qualified to run the practice. This is basic consumer protection, but states have varying ownership thresholds. Take our South Carolina engineering firm example. If it wishes to foreign qualify in the state of New York, it must demonstrate that 100% of the company's membership or shares are owned by professionals licensed in New York. For many firms, that is not possible. Either select individuals aren't specifically licensed in New York or they're not engineers at all because their home state doesn't mandate it. The only other option then for our South Carolina firm is to consider an entity called the Design Professional Corporation. For that entity, the state of New York sets the bar at 75.01% of owners that need to be licensed, along with a host of other considerations. Firms may quickly discover they need several entities, each with different ownership structures to comply in each state where they operate. How to name and structure the ownership of a new entity will take time and sometimes major consideration by management, and it is essential to understanding the process and getting the firm properly registered. While these requirements and hurdles have always existed, many AEC firms are facing broader exposure in the rush to bid on new projects from the recent infrastructure bill and rebounding construction markets. It's imperative to be ready to clear regulatory hurdles in each state in order to win. As a result, management must take a significantly longer term view with respect to licensing. I also want to point out that firms should consult with their legal, tax, and accounting professionals. These parties are there to advise the business on their specific requirements as well as on any tax or legal liability. We have an example of this to share. Recently, my colleague spoke with the CFO of a fast growing Maryland firm. They had an employee starting in the state of New York in a month. She thought that was plenty of time, saying she turned her attention to the registration during the week the employee started. Now recall what we just discussed. In New York, foreign registration with the Department of State can take several weeks on its own. To set up the domestic design professional corporation can take months. Coupled with the time it takes the Department of Taxation and Finance to process tax registration applications, you could conservatively add 3 weeks to another month. That means the best time to get started without incurring additional expedite fees would have been a minimum of 16 weeks before the employee's start date, if not several months. Any additional delay jeopardizes the firm's ability to onboard and pay that employee. Firms everywhere are running into the same issue, setting up in each state, from determining whether or not the entity has nexus and even needs to register, to the process of filing and securing various registrations and accounts across agencies takes time. With out of state registration, it's not practical to wait until you have an employee ready to start, and it's not efficient to repeat the same scramble in each new state. Management and especially HR and legal teams need to be in lockstep, reviewing the hiring pipeline and ensuring registrations are in order as soon as it becomes feasible. As a result, just like the process of registering the entity, it's important to examine your firm's unique tax requirements up front, understand the order of operations, and work proactively to secure the necessary accounts. Remember, because state requirements and your firm's specific nexus change, it's important to repeat this on a regular basis, and we recommend doing so in collaboration with a CPA or other tax or accounting professional. By doing all of this, the firm monitors where each state requirements potentially apply and can be ready to register when it becomes a necessity. So now we have a summary of our best practices for researching, planning, and applying for expansion into new states and during foreign qualification. A holistic approach is needed, which involves conducting comprehensive research in the state before attempting to file anything, understanding the order of operations, for example, register the entity or obtain the license first. Consult with legal, tax, and accounting professionals. 4, have internal discussions and make decisions about entity name, structure, and ownership that may need to take place first. 5, identify qualifiers, responsible parties. 6, beware of logical or logistical difficulties that could result in delays and thus penalties. And finally, number 7, managing the applications and filing fees across multiple agencies, each adhering to their various deadlines. Now, let's turn our attention to another aspect of compliance, tax registration. In the vast majority of states, and for most tax accounts, action by the business is required in the form of the tax registration application. Whereas business entity registration takes place with the Secretary of State and licensing is handled by the licensing boards, tax registration is a distinctly separate process and it takes place with the Department of Revenue. Businesses have the obligation of determining their tax liability and then registering to open tax accounts. Only in very limited cases are tax accounts opened automatically, such as franchise tax in California or Texas. To the right, you'll see a list of a few common tax types a business may need to register for in a state. There may be multiple agencies involved in tax registrations, each with its own process, and applications and firms need to plan ahead for lengthy processing times, sometimes 3 to 6 months or longer. And once registered, these accounts are then required to file returns and pay taxes. We have a lot to cover in today's presentation, so we'll avoid a deep examination of any specific registration application. However, for those of you who aren't familiar with the tax registration process, just know that these applications require highly detailed information on the company, its ownership, and planned taxable activity. And all that entity registration maintenance is just the appetizer. That all has to be done before even getting started on the license management process. Once licensed in a given jurisdiction, the firm will have license ID numbers, registration dates, and renewal deadlines, and continuously changing requirements to navigate. With over 1,500 AEC filings, keeping up with changes to requirements can be time consuming. And as the firm grows and becomes licensed in multiple jurisdictions or specialties, the complexity increases. Along with the license application itself, there is other documentation needed while keeping up with continuing education, surety bonds, and insurance requirements and financial statements. Many of these were required with the initial license application, and they need to be maintained and reported to the licensing agencies. Licensing renewals applications usually require proof of good standing from the Secretary of State as well. Renewing licenses on time can take more effort than you'd expect, as many agencies require maintenance filings anytime there is a change to a company name, ownership, contact information, or operating activity. As mentioned earlier, many licensing jurisdictions stipulate that the business maintains internal records and follows certain governance or ownership requirements. These may or may not need to be reported on a license renewal application, but most licensing agencies have the authority to enforce and penalize governance violations. Many firms expect their individual engineers to manage their own continuing ed and license renewals. The firm loses a key level of oversight and faces increased risk by keeping individual licenses at an arm's length. As we'll touch on later, even a single lapsed individual license from a qualifying engineer can have major consequences. So, whether or not a firm has the administrative capability to directly handle individual license renewals, it should invest in a solution that, at a minimum, gives management direct insight into the status of practitioners in any state and at any time. Relying on spreadsheets and other legacy systems with manual reminders runs the risk of a compliance lapse, leading to direct financial penalties, but more importantly, a gap in the ability to operate and secure new business. You need to develop a system to manage all aspects, all of the aspects to maintaining and renewing multiple licenses. As firms grow and operate across states, one of the biggest challenges becomes keeping up with the changing regulatory requirements. Across the country, as we mentioned, there are over 800 AEC license types, over 1,500 different licensing filings, and thousands of filing authorities at the state and local levels. On top of that, every state has its own continuing education and professional development rules. The key isn't just knowing today's requirements, it's staying current as those requirements evolve. Best practice is to review your requirements at least once a year and build any changes directly into your licensing and record keeping process. That way, new rules don't become last minute surprises. It's also important to allow enough time to complete new applications or filings when requirements change. When firms plan ahead, they protect their ability to operate and avoid unnecessary disruption, as well as stay in good standing wherever they do business. Monitoring changes to requirements isn't just about avoiding problems, it's about creating a system that supports long term stability and growth. So, for a summary of best practices, one, securing new licenses, review Secretary of State requirements alongside state licensing board requirements before beginning any filings. Two, managing qualifiers, set up an automated system to track and report license statuses of all qualifying professionals, including education, continuing education certifications. Three, expanding into new states. Research administrative habits and preferences of state agencies in each new jurisdiction early in your planning and allow time for the application review process. Four, maintaining renewals in good standing. Keep your records up to date with the board and set up an automated system of reminders of all license renewal dates. And five, monitoring changes to requirements. Review licensing requirements in each jurisdiction on a regular basis and incorporate into licensing and compliance systems. Firms that now operate in multiple states may need to repeat these processes in every state wherever required. To address this, management should start thinking about ways to proactively manage complexity across jurisdictions. The only effective way to do this is with a planned system that lays out clear roles and processes to handle information, registration, and ongoing reporting. To facilitate, management should also consider outsourcing more components of the process to specialized vendors. Relying on spreadsheets and other legacy systems with manual reminders runs the risk of a critical lapse, leading to direct financial penalties, but more importantly, a gap in the ability to operate and secure new business. Firms need to consider their business compliance and professional licensing management as a system to reduce the risk of slipping through the cracks and firms falling out of good standing. The system needs to provide full visibility and encompass all licensing stakeholders and their activities, including the individual engineers license and tracking their CEUs, the operations and administrative leads who manage the system day to day, to human resources handling the hiring and onboarding, and often also in tracking continuing education, the legal counsel and financial administrators coordinating on certificates of authority and other compliance needs, and even the marketing and business development teams who need to know, are we registered to do business in this state for any proposals that are under consideration? So we are going to launch another poll question. How is your firm currently managing professional licenses? Spreadsheets, internal systems, third party provider, an attorney? Looks like spreadsheets and third party providers are neck and neck. Internal systems is pretty close as well. Nobody utilizing an attorney so far. Think that is just about everyone. Thank you for participating in the poll. It looks like majority are using spreadsheets with a decent number using internal systems or third-party vendors. The best way or dream state to manage compliance starts with a proactive and comprehensive system for complying. It involves a top down strategy as well as the right people, process, and technology to execute. To address this, management should also start thinking about ways to proactively manage complexity across jurisdictions. The only effective way to do this is with a planned system that lays out clear roles and processes to handle research, registration, and ongoing reporting. To facilitate, management should also consider outsourcing non core components of the process to specialized vendors. On your screen are components of what a system might include, which we'll dive into here on the last segment of today's call. Starting with establishing a system for business information record and records. This includes tracking entity tax and licensing data, managing corporate tax and licensing filings, maintaining a registered agent, and timely notification of key staff changes. You must also command the renewal of the firm and individual licenses. This includes a reliable research process to track ongoing changes, up-to-date CE requirements, and automated timelines and filing alerts. It's also important to define clear internal roles and processes for compliance activities. To be clear, every firm is unique. What we share here is general in nature and based on our extensive experience working with organizations of all sizes. But we encourage you to take these ideas back to your management teams and legal counsels in order to shape your overall compliance program. Many of you may be concerned about the complexity of managing licensing and business entity requirements and the ongoing drain on staff time. Compliance registrations and renewals are key areas that can be handled with trained internal staff or outsourced, for example, to a service provider. Harbor Compliance offers a white glove, soup to nuts experience. We'll file on your behalf and maintain registrations and licenses for you. Remember, everyone plays a part, internally and externally, starting with management. The key is to be proactive and review all of your roles and processes regularly. We've talked about the various complexities involved in managing business compliance in a modern era, and we've discussed the importance of a robust compliance program that encompasses internal processes and which ties into the organization's growth strategy. Use the information you've learned here and communicate it to your management team. Take some time to self assess, especially if you've been employing or hiring, selling, or operating across state lines. Gaps may emerge that simply cannot be met using existing processes and resources. Business evolves faster and faster. It's increasingly important to be aligned with a vendor who can support your ever changing needs across the enterprise. Now that We've talked about how complex licensing requirements can be. Let's look at how firms can solve this challenge in practice. On the left, you see the core issue, researching license requirements. Across the US, there are more than 800 AEC licensing requirements and more than 1,500 different filings. That encompasses both individual and firms. These vary by state and even local jurisdictions, and they also differ by license type. Traditionally, this means hours of manual research, calling agencies, and trying to interpret state websites that weren't designed for multi state firms. On the right is the solution, Compliance Navigator AI. This tool replaces that manual research process. Instead of digging through agency websites state by state, you can input your industry and jurisdiction and have a professional grade report within minutes, covering licensing, permitting, and entity registration and tax obligations. The goal is simple: help your firm meet regulatory requirements faster and move forward with confidence instead of guesswork. Once you understand the requirements, the next step is execution. That means preparing and filing applications, understanding prerequisites, and managing the process for firm licenses, license qualifiers, and entity registrations all at the same time. This is where managed licensing services come in. Instead of handling each step manually, firms can simplify the entire process of researching, applying for, managing, and renewing their licenses through a single centralized solution. And alongside that, having a nationwide registered agent is critical. States require firms to maintain a registered agent to receive legal and regulatory documents. This ensures nothing important is missed and supports your ability to stay in good standing wherever you operate. Together, managed licensing and registered agent services create a strong foundation for meeting regulatory requirements in every state. Next is one of the most sensitive parts of maintaining good standing, and that is managing the qualifiers. Each firm needs to designate specific licensed individuals as qualifiers for each entity in each state. The first step is knowing exactly who those people are and where the gaps exist. From there, firms should consider whether specialty trade qualifiers are required and ensure that the qualifier information is always current with the licensing boards. Many states require changes to be reported in as little as 10 days, as discussed earlier. It's also important to plan for the unexpected. That means creating contingency plans and identifying replacement qualifiers ahead of time so you're not scrambling if someone leaves the firm or becomes unavailable. It is also important finally, firms need a system that tracks qualifier status, continuing education, and triggers immediate tasks when a qualifier departs. Without that visibility, it's easy for a single lapse to quickly affect the firm's ability to operate. When firms expand into new states, the number of regulatory requirements obviously increases quickly. There are five major components to this challenge. First, business expansion itself adds administrative complexity across multiple agencies. Second, entity structure and naming requirements may vary by state. What works in one state may be rejected in another. Third, business ownership rules may require restructuring or even forming a new entity in certain jurisdictions. Fourth, tax registrations must be completed separately and often involve multiple state departments with long processing times. And finally, successful expansion requires a holistic approach, coordinating licensing, entity registration, tax accounts, and internal decision making. Treating any one of these steps in isolation increases the risk of delays, penalties, and missed opportunities. Once the licenses are secured, the work does not stop. Each renewal cycle requires firms to research updated requirements, prepare documentation, and submit the filings again. This includes changes to formation documents, financial statements, proof of firm and qualifier licenses, continuing education, surety bonds, insurance certifications, and good standing certificates. Renewals are especially sensitive because requirements can change year to year, and what worked last cycle may not work this time around. That's why renewal management should be treated as an ongoing process, not a once a year scramble. Firms that rely on manual tracking or spreadsheets often find out way too late that something was missed, which can impact their ability to operate. The final challenge is keeping up with regulatory change. Licensing requirements aren't static, they evolve constantly across the states, professions, and agencies. Firms need to track changes to entity data, licensing data, tax data, and corporate records all at once. This requires a system that doesn't just store information but actively monitors and updates it. When a rule changes, that change has to be reflected in how your firm manages its licenses and filings. With a centralized source of truth, firms can adapt proactively, protect their good standing, and avoid surprises that disrupt operations. Harbor Compliance offers a one stop solution for many of the challenges you've heard presented today. We've taken these strategies and defined what constitutes an ideal system and built a suite of services and software around it. We've built cloud-based compliance software and continuously maintain a database of nationwide requirements. It keeps everyone within your organization up to date on your registration statuses in each state. It provides a secure, efficient, and effective way for your organization to maintain and access compliance information. Of course, organizations that register in multiple states and have multiple entities gain additional value. Access to our software is available as part of managed services or a standalone software solution. There are five purpose built modules: License Manager, Entity Manager, Tax Manager, Records Manager, and the Requirements Research Engine. So, when we talk about needing a single place to manage registration data, records, and reporting deadlines, our software modules do just that. They provide your organization with valuable reporting insights needed to easily assess where your business is registered. We also provide the support services to manage the compliance system. That includes registered agent, annual reports, managed licenses, Secretary of State registrations, tax registrations, and even DBAs, as well as many other lifecycle filings as needed. We offer managed services by AEC compliance experts at the level of support you desire, from onboarding support to fully managed services. In closing, Harbor Compliance offers software and managed licensing services, business lifecycle services, and tax registration services across the United States. We are also a nationwide provider of registered agent service with local offices in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, and even Canada. We offer support we offer support on as comprehensive a basis as you require. Whether your firm needs assistance managing licenses to book new business or to register or maintain entities, open tax accounts, or apply for business licenses, your dedicated account services team will support you. At this point, we want to thank you for joining us today and offer you a free Compliance Navigator AI research report. We doesn't look like we have time for any questions, but to use the Compliance Navigator tool, you can simply scan one of these QR codes or send me an email after the webinar concludes, and I'll send you a link. It is one free search per email address. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. And like we said earlier, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or if there's anything that we can help with. Um, Thomas, for the CPE, I believe that you'll receive an email after the webinar concludes that will give instructions on how to get the CPE. Kristen, in terms of the qualifying agent to have their own license, it differs, from state to state, license type to license type. But essentially, there's the firm license, which is in many states applied for and obtained by the firm, and then an individual license tied to that firm license. So let's take, for example, an electrical contractor license. If a firm has an electrical contractor license, in many states, there needs to be a qualifying individual, which may be the master electrician. So that individual license tied to the firm electrical contractor license. Does that make sense? Joshua, in Arizona, recently they made the qualifier have a personal email address for the renewal. Let me check on that. I'll follow up, see what information our service team has on that specific item. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining today. Like I said, feel free to reach out with any questions. Have a great rest of your day.